This is NDTV, and you're watching NDTV 24/7.
So it's fascinating how the economic cycles have gone from a historical average over 150 years you've studied.
Yes.
Every 3 years you get a cycle. You get an expansion of 3 years, then a cycle. Now to 9 years in the last 20 years. And you're saying that's going to change now. But what has been the impact of this longer economic cycle? I mean, hasn't it been good for the economy and good for society in general? Or?
Well, unfortunately not. That's what you'd like to believe. But what has tended to happen is that the longer the cycle, the more the existing players have benefited. And it's
right, because it tends to reinforce those who are already doing well.
That's right. And it's not caused any real renewal. And I think that one sort of big factor which has come to plague the American society over the past decade has been this problem of inequality. A lot of economists have spoken about that how wages in America have been stagnant at a median level,
right.
How there's more concentration of wealth at the top. And there's a very good statistic to sort of back that up, which shows that for many decades, you had the top 10% of the American population
right.
controlled about 35% of the total income of the country.
Right.
But over the past decade, that went up to 50%.
I mean, that's a huge change. It's people
right.
like you, actually, isn't it?
I would like to believe that, yeah. But
so 50%, now 10% of the people of America actually control 50% of the income of that country.
Yes.
And it used to be just 1/3, actually.
Yes, that's right.
That's a huge, huge change.
Right. And at the wealth level, it's even more stunning, which is that the top 1% of the American population account for about 40% of the country's wealth. So this inequality has become a really big issue in America. And this is not the dynamic capitalist society that America was for many decades before that.
Yeah, because I guess the change and the churn went, more efficient people would come up. But here you're just reinforcing the same, and they're making the rich richer.
Yes, and ironically...
it has social implications as well, you think?
Yes, I think it does. But I think that the point which I find fascinating is, and quite ironical, that it's really the sort of left-wing economists who are calling for even more stimulus, without quite, I think, realizing that the more they stimulate the existing system, the more they benefit the existing players, rather than helping the poor. And as I said, that nothing has hurt America more or the global economy than I think QE2, because food and oil prices went up significantly after we implemented QE2 in the US. And the people who get really hit by that are the people at the lower income of the population. Just one sort of example is that in America, the top 10% of the population, just about 3 to 4% of their income goes towards energy consumption.
Right.
But you move to the bottom 50%, and that figure goes up to 12%.
So if energy prices go up, they're the ones, the bottom 50% gets affected.
Yes, the lower down the curve, the more they're impacted by higher food and energy prices.
Right.
And the evidence is fairly firm to show that ever since they implemented QE2, commodity prices went up a lot. And I think that's something which matters a lot for India too, because if you look at India's sort of inflation problem, a lot of it is imported, that because we had very high commodity prices globally, that's something which has also led to much higher inflation in India over the past year.
So now that you've brought that out, just give us a historical view of commodity prices and how that could affect India. You have said in the past that commodity prices generally over the decades, there's a downward trend. If we just look at some of the data on that.
Yeah, we've looked at commodity price data going back the last couple of 100 years. And commodity prices tend to follow a fairly standard pattern, which is that they tend to rise for 1 decade and then fall for 2 decades.
I see.
So what tends to happen here is that because of that, the commodity prices over time tend to decline. I'm talking here about not gold. Gold tends to hold its value over time, but other commodity prices tend to decline.
NDTV's cricket app, Android and iPhone, fastest scorecard, special analysis, and much more. Download free. NDTV.com/apps.